The greatest collective memory of a society lies in its horrors. Both the hardships experienced and the terror inflicted upon others, in time, begins to sketch out a universal identity of the people governed by it. In the arts, that memory is made tangible and retrievable, absorbing the remnants of cultural artifacts into the mythos and myth-making that comes to define both the confines of their world and the scope of the dreams they're capable of conjuring. The best modern horror, after all, is a synthesis of these dark influences. In film, it's so often the coalescence of familiar visual and auditory horror aesthetics that are made accessible to audiences. One of the best practitioners of this in recent years has been Robert Eggers, and it's his 2019 film, The Lighthouse, that is genre-defining in this regard, merging the occult horror with the mysticism found in sailor tales of old. It is a modern work of symbolist genius. There's several harrowing scenes whose visuals can't help but be left implanted in us, none more potent than this snapshot during Winslow's drunken hallucinations in the second act. If you've done the assigned viewing, you'd know what this scene references. It is the painting aptly titled Hypnosis by the German artist Sascha Schneider. It is arrestingly haunting, capturing the mystery, darkness, and psychosexual wonder at the center of the hearts and minds of the symbolist painters in Western Europe at the time. Its greatest quality might just be its immediacy, one we're transfixed by through every aspect of its construction, its composition, from the strong, imposing staging of the figures to the physicality of the male form, understood through the gestural, outstretched forceful limbs and rigid bodies, to of course the gaze that entraps us as viewers as much as it does the subject, mesmerized by the spiritual force of light beckoning from the unkind eyes of this seemingly otherworldly being. It's within these homoerotic overtures and dark aesthetic qualities we bear witness to a painting that at its essence is a commentary on free will, that in the face of forces far darker and more coercive, falls completely asunder. To a viewer of the film witnessing Winslow and Wake's gradual descent into madness, it becomes obvious why this companion piece works so well here. But it's more than just a simple fantastical depiction that aids in the telling of the story of tormented lighthouse keepers. It stands alone as a personal assessment of Schneider himself, whose works, along with the bevy of symbolist painters of the period, served as full embodied commentaries on the kind of mass hysteria they found prevalent within their increasingly industrializing societies at the turn of the century. Born in St. Petersburg, Russia, Schneider would eventually move to Dresden, Germany, just a few short months after the death of his father due to illness. There, he'd study at the Academy of Fine Arts, where he'd follow in the tradition of symbolist painters of the period. Originally a French literary movement of the early 1800s, it began in part as a reaction against the rationalism and materialism that dominated Western European culture at the time, instead placing power above all else in the validity of the subjective, empowered by the expression of ideas by the individual as far more suited to understanding the human condition than even the natural world itself. The symbolist painters took this literary concept to even further lengths, taking the machinations of their inner subjective lives and expressing them visually, exploding them thematically against their canvases. The rational world be damned. From Gauguin to Moreau, the subject of their works often delved into the imaginary, dream worlds, vast and esoteric, some reminiscent of biblical tales and parables, others far more monstrous, inundated with overly suggestive imagery, focusing on love, fear, death, sexual awakenings, and unrequited love. Their subjects were often either femme fatales or virgins, capable of embodying the expansive, pervasive themes that drove the minds of these men and their chauvinistic torment. In Schneider's symbolist paintings, however, we see a different kind of artistic inner subjectivity manifested, where the oft overused femme fatales are replaced with masculine subjects, deep studies of male anatomy and erotic forms. In his works, his subjects are varied. We see everything from the sinking eyes of a monster shrouded in darkness to inky black portrayals of executioners, archangels and arbiters of the damned, unsure as audiences whether to position them as maliciously evil forces or rather the forces of justice, performing necessary reckoning on lost souls. In Hypnosis, we might find some clarity here. In its strong staging, its juxtaposing forces of spirituality and humanity, it reads almost like a kind of dark creation of Adam, with a godly figure not bringing his creation into being through love and respect, but through his own bidding, the antithesis of the free will that is equally culpable in bringing about our own destruction. Schneider was a gay man in Germany at a time when it was illegal, a kind of internal tension we see explored in his many dark canvases and the interplay between opposing male forces, either dominant or submissive. He painted Hypnosis during his professorship in Weimar, in the midst of falling in love with a student several years his junior, named Helmuth, who rejected his many advances. In the letters written the same year he made Hypnosis, we begin to piece together the psychological effect this unrequited love had on him, and how it manifested in the darkness he brought to life through his work. It's such a thing with Helmuth. While the artist's passion and interest draws me to him, I am often repelled by his coldness towards my fire, his poor upbringing, and an outspoken selfishness. There is an internal up and down in my moods, and a complete helplessness in states that, like a kind of fate, keep me captive without taking my wishes into account in any way. I almost wished I was rid of him. In any case, I would have never met him. But the thought of parting without dragging him into that desolate town almost drives me insane. Oh, if only he could love me a 10th part as much as I love him. This is a man racked with the guilt of unrequited love, a kind we've all experienced. Helplessness, up and down mood swings, both drawn and repelled by the forces of yearning, all in the same instance. It's here we can reframe Hypnosis as a visual metaphor for his own internal psychology, where the love he experiences is a force so great he's willing to hypnotize his victim in order to achieve it, to have it reciprocated. This casts a far more ominous and darker shadow on his character, but in rereading the passage, there's certain things that begin to take on an additional dimension. Schneider doesn't simply want to hypnotize Helmuth into requiting his love, as it were. He instead finds himself hypnotized by his own helplessness. It's him held captive by his own emotions, despite other wishes to be rid of Helmuth altogether. In understanding Hypnosis through this far more complicated lens, it's Schneider who's depicted on the right and the left, somehow both helpless, naked, and afraid, and forced to succumb to his own darker, primal instincts and affectations, which take the form of some man in executioner's garb. It's a piece that shows how the forces of supernatural feeling and the subjective take on lives of their own, how the human mind can't help but be made defenseless in their presence, how quickly we can become the agent of our own demise through a desire capable of killing us. It's a painting that, in showcasing the warring battle between the human soul in conflict with itself, depicts not just the internal battle Schneider dealt with, but the wider onslaught entrenched in his society, as a force equally as coercive in regulating the mind and the body. This identity was partly what drove the core of a coinciding movement in Germany at the time known as FKK, or the Free Body Movement. It was a proto-queer, proto-hippie movement that championed the benefits of open-air nudity and free and fast living. This was in part a reaction to the growing developments of the Industrial Revolution, where thinkers, artists, and philosophers saw the realities of close-together urban living as far more alienating and all-consuming, separating humans almost deliberately from our true calling that could be found in a connection to nature. We see this pointedly in Schneider's rendering of the subject, as a man lost in a field of flowers and foliage, frolicking, forced back into reality by the dark underlying forces of the industrial world, forces that don't so much lead him back from being astray as they do seize him all at once, back towards a reality that is equally as elusive. In Hypnosis, we bear witness to the depiction of a man living in his free sexuality, now forced to conform, taken by an executioner who represents above all else absolute societal truth. Truth that, despite purporting itself to be defended through the schools of logic and reason that the rationalists clung to, is instead propped up through violence, brutality, and coercion. It's a painting about the encroachment of the industrial on free thought, on the raw, ultimate passion found in the human experience. Even in a space where the body finds itself free and lost, made anew in this process of returning to nature, the mind is still accessible, still capable and necessary to be conquered by an industrialist world whose growth knows no bounds. After his many failed, unrequited love attempts, Helmuth would threaten to out Schneider, forcing him on the run in and out of Germany for several years, where he'd eventually find comfort and friendship in other gay artists and painters, starting his own academy where he'd continue to produce works based on the male form visually, but the human soul thematically, in constant conflict with both itself and the overwhelming constraints of the society around them. Hypnosis is the pinnacle of his ambition. It is his grief and torment laid bare. It is the subjective mind made universal. It is the dark creation of Adam. As you may know, the creation of Adam was a work of dual purpose. It depicts not just Adam as God's creation, brought from dust to life, but can also be understood and read as God as Adam's creation, of man's, a figment of our collective imagination, a North Star to make some sense of the betrayal, hurt, destruction, and chaos in this world. In Schneider's work, that darkness of society is understood as our collective creation, a ritual of hypnosis we all take part in. Schneider, like the very best artists, finds himself in both of these figures. In the naked man, he sees his freedom, his sexuality, his connection to nature, forced into submission by the state. But in the executioner, he sees his own enlightenment, made to make others see the totality of their docility. Like tasting the forbidden fruit for the first time, his art brings us closer to understanding the truths of the underlying forces that guide us. Lost in that very same garden, we become mesmerized for a moment by the awesome power we're capable of, but then cowering, afraid, ashamed of our own nakedness we've just become privy to, not clothed by a God of mercy and remorse, but forcefully brought into the light, whose revelations are equally as blinding. Mind Theater is a solo effort produced and written by me, Eo Akingbade. For only $3 a month, you could support the show on Patreon. It really helps a lot. The link is in the description box below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.